A biblical theological commentary on Genesis 8. Genesis 8 stands as the structural and theological pivot of the flood narrative. The textual hinge occurs in verse 1, "But God remembered Noah." This act of divine remembrance is not mere cognitive recall, but covenantal activation. Within the framework of Walter C. Kaiser Jr.'s Promise Plan theology, God's remembrance here ensures the historical continuity of the redemptive line. The flood had presented a cosmic threat to the proto-evangelium, the promise of the seed of the woman who would crush the serpent, as foretold in Genesis 3:15. By preserving Noah, God kept that promise alive. The narrative of Genesis 8 deliberately echoes the original creation account in Genesis 1. It portrays the emergence of dry land from the chaotic waters as a profound act of new creation. This highlights the organic unity of Scripture. God's redemptive purposes are not derailed by human rebellion. Instead, they are progressively unfolded through judgment and recreation. Upon exiting the ark, Noah's immediate response is the construction of the first explicitly mentioned altar in the biblical text. In Genesis 8, verse 20, he offers burnt offerings from every clean animal and bird. This event anticipates the sophisticated Levitical cultus that would later be established at Sinai. The distinction between clean and unclean animals was already operative in the patriarchal period. Drawing on the scholarship of Jacob Milgrom, we see that this sacrificial framework was well understood in that cultural environment. The sacrifice produces a soothing aroma to the Lord. It satisfies divine justice and secures God's pledge never to curse the ground again in this manner. This pre-Levitical sacrificial system establishes the theological baseline for the New Testament's presentation of Christ's atonement. Just as Noah's sacrifice secured the stability of the earthly realm, Christ's sacrifice addresses both ritual and moral impurity, ultimately cleansing the heavenly tabernacle and restoring the eternal divine presence. The New Testament authors repeatedly draw on the flood narrative, particularly Genesis 8, as a typological matrix for understanding eschatology, salvation, and faith. In Matthew chapter 24, verses 37 through 39, and Luke chapter 17, verses 26 and 27, Jesus uses the days of Noah as the definitive historical analogy for the suddenness of eschatological judgment and the necessity of divine preservation. The author of Hebrews in chapter 11, verse 7, highlights Noah's reverent submission and faith. The preparation of the ark condemned the unbelieving world and made Noah an heir of righteousness. In 1 Peter chapter 3, verses 20 and 21, Peter connects the physical deliverance of 8 souls through the floodwaters to the spiritual deliverance of believers through baptism. The water acts as both the agent of judgment on the wicked and the medium of salvation for the righteous. And in 2 Peter chapter 2, verse 5 and chapter 3, verses 5 and 6, Peter reflects on God preserving Noah, a herald of righteousness, as evidence that guarantees the certainty of final judgment by fire. The historical reality of the flood and God's covenant with creation in Genesis 8, verses 21 and 22, anchor the progressive unfolding of redemption. For the modern believer, Genesis 8 demonstrates that God's promises, once spoken, are preserved even through the darkest judgments. The ark stands as a compelling type of the Messiah, the sole divinely ordained refuge from God's righteous judgment. Notes and Bibliography. This commentary draws from Walter C. Kaiser Jr.'s book, The Promise Plan of God, and Jacob Milgrom's work on Leviticus. Thank you for listening.